The air tasted wrong before anything else happened. Castiel noticed it first standing in the clearing, where the trees leaned away from an invisible center. Not sulfur, not ozone. Something that made his grace recoil like touching bare wire. The readings had led him here. Nephilim energy concentrated and growing. Jack's birth had torn reality in ways they were still cataloging. This was the 7th anomaly site, but the instruments in Castiel's borrowed truck showed numbers that climbed past their maximum values and kept climbing. He approached the epicenter. The grass beneath his feet bent at altered angles, not crushed, but geometrically reshaped, each blade a perfect 45 degrees off true. The ground felt solid enough. His vessel's heart maintained its steady rhythm. But the wrongness intensified with each step pressing against his perceptions like static against a screen. The rift opened without warning. No build-up. No portal ritual. One moment Castiel stood in a Kansas forest at twilight. The next space folded along a seam that had always been there, but never visible. And what lay beyond pulled him through before his wings could even think to unfold. He landed hard in ash. The impact drove breath from his vessel's lungs. Above him, the sky burned red, not with sunset, but with a quality of light that suggested the sun had given up and left only the burning. Castiel pushed himself upright. His hands came away gray with particulate matter that had once been structures people meaning. The apocalypse world. He recognized it from intelligence reports from the few refugees who had spoken of their Earth before dying. This version of reality where Michael had won, where humanity lost, where the war never ended because there was nothing left worth fighting for. A demon materialized 20 feet away, smoke and meat shaped into something that wore a human face badly. It saw Castiel and shrieked, the sound carrying both rage and hunger, before launching itself forward with movements that bent joints in unnatural directions. Castiel reached for his blade. The demon covered half the distance. Then it stopped. The creature hung suspended in midair, frozen mid-lunge. Its scream cut off, not like a door closing, but like a delete button pressed. For 3 seconds, nothing moved. Then, the demon began to fold, not crumpling, not collapsing, folding with the precision of origami, performed by someone who understood geometry better than flesh. Bone bent at angles that created new shapes. Skin stretched across impossible architectures. The thing that had been a demon became a triangle of compressed matter screaming without sound, as its form was rewritten according to rules that had never applied to this universe before. Blood sprayed outwards. Halfway through its arc, the droplets froze in the air, arranging themselves into letters 6 feet high. Welcome! Each character perfectly formed, perfectly spaced a banner, written in the demon's own fluids, hung against the burning sky. Behind the suspended letters, something stepped through the rift. Yellow. That registered first in Castiel's perception. A triangle the color of warning signs, of hazard tape, of things that should not be looked at directly. One eye dominated, its center pupil blown wide, and watching everything with an attention that felt less like sight and more like targeting. The shape hovered above the ash like it weighed nothing, or like weight was a concept it simply declined to acknowledge. Small limbs extended from its form, tipped with white gloves that moved with cartoon fluidity. A tiny top hat sat on its uppermost point, a black bow tie somehow visible beneath it, both accessories defying any structural logic. The eye blinked. Castiel felt the action register across every molecule of his vessel. The triangle spoke. Oh man, a universe where angels bleed. This is going to be fun. The eye dilated with something like anticipation. And the best part, doors like this don't stay the same size. Its voice carried the cadence of a game show host, bright and enthusiastic, selling something wonderful. But beneath the cheer ran a frequency that made Castiel's grace tracked, recognizing something old and wrong, and utterly delighted with itself. The triangle gestured. The word welcome rotated 90 degrees and fell like rain, each drop of blood hitting the ground with a wet slap that spelled out secondary messages Castiel couldn't read before they soaked into ash. "You look confused," the triangle said, drifting closer. "Let me help with that. I'm Bill Cipher. This is my entrance. You're the angel who just gave me a door into a reality that's already broken. We're going to be great friends." Castiel's hand found his blade. The angel blade felt small in his grip, inadequate. The triangle noticed and laughed. "Oh, adorable. You think sharp objects matter here?" "No, wait, don't tell me." The eye narrowed in something like concentration. "You're Castiel, angel of Thursday, fallen, raised, died a few times, currently operating under the delusion that you serve free will." The information came too easily pulled from sources Castiel couldn't identify. His grace was shielded. His thoughts were his own. But the triangle spoke with certainty, each fact delivered like a punchline. "How did you—" "Oh, I didn't read your diary, if that's what you're worried about." Bill drifted in a lazy circle. "The rift remembers things. Nephilim energy is chatty when you know how to listen. And you, my celestial friend, you touched it first. Left all kinds of fingerprints. Something howled in the distance. Not demon, not angel. Something native to this broken world drawn by the wrongness that Bill's presence amplified." The triangle didn't turn to look. "We're going to get interrupted in a second," Bill said conversationally. "Local wildlife, very rude. But before they show up, I need you to understand something important." He drifted closer, casual. "I could end you right now. Snap you like a glow stick. But where's the fun in that?" The eye fixed on Castiel with absolute focus. "I didn't force my way in. You opened the door. Your Nephilim cracked reality, and I just walked through the gap. No breaking and entering. No cosmic trespassing. This is all very legal. There are laws, sure. Your laws. Heaven's laws, the rules you all agreed on before I showed up." The triangle's form rippled with something that might have been amusement. "But here's the thing about laws, Castiel. They only work when everyone agrees what the words mean." The howling grew closer. Multiple sources now converging. Castiel counted at least 8 distinct voices. "You should run," Bill said helpfully. "Or fight, or pray. Whatever makes you feel better. I'm going to stay and redecorate." Castiel made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He ran. Behind him, the howling reached a crescendo, then cut off into sounds he had no words for. Wet noises. Breaking noises. The specific acoustic signature of matter being rearranged by something that understood the rules well enough to rewrite them. Castiel ran through ash and didn't look back. His grace screamed warnings his vessel couldn't fully process. Behind him, Bill Cipher laughed, and the sound carried across the wasteland like a broadcast on frequencies that shouldn't exist. The angel found shelter in a collapsed bunker, half buried in debris. He pressed against the concrete vessel's lungs, working hard, and tried to understand what had just entered the world. Not a demon, not an angel, not any classification he had words for. Something that wore the shape of geometry and spoke with a salesman's smile, while reality bent around it, like a curtain caught in a breeze. Castiel reached for his phone. Dead air and static, the world refusing to carry a call. Nothing worked here, drained by the same apocalyptic conditions that had killed everything else. But the rift was still open. If he could get back through Warren, Sam, and Dean, close it before. The concrete above him groaned. Castiel looked up. The ceiling was fine, structurally sound. But the groan came anyway, like the building was learning to speak. A voice echoed down through the rubble, cheerful and clear. "Oh, don't leave yet. We haven't even done introductions properly." The concrete began to fold. Castiel ran again deeper into the bunker's guts. where the shadows were thick enough to hide in. Behind him, Bill's laughter followed like a spotlight, illuminating every place he might hide. The angel fled into the dark and wondered how you fought something that treated physics like a suggestion. Now, can we just talk about that entrance for a second, Bill? Cipher really knows how to make a scene. He turns a demon into a literal piece of origami and uses blood to write a welcome sign. What is super interesting to me is how Bill says he did not even break into this world. He just walked through the door Castiel and Jack left open. It makes you think, is Cass actually the one to blame for this mess? If you were an angel and saw a floating yellow triangle laughing at your blade, would you run or stay and fight? Let me know in the comments before we see how Sam and Dean react to the news. The bunker's alarm system screamed at 3 in the morning. Sam was already awake, staring at data that refused to make sense. 7 anomaly sites in 48 hours. Each one escalating, each one leaving marks that instruments couldn't properly measure because the readings climbed past maximum and kept climbing into ranges that suggested the equipment had malfunctioned, except every device showed identical impossibilities. Dean stumbled into the library, hair standing up, gun already in hand. Reflex. The alarm meant breach, and breach meant something had found them. Sam killed the sound with a keystroke. Not inside. It's the monitoring grid. Something's triggering every sensor within 100 miles. Cass, I don't know. Sam's screen showed a map bleeding red markers like a rash spreading across Kansas. He went to check the 7th site 6 hours ago. Radio silent since. Dean was moving before Sam finished the sentence, grabbing his jacket, his bag, the angel blade that lived next to his bed. Sam followed, laptop tucked under one arm, already plotting the route to the last known coordinates. The Impala 8 highway at speeds that would get them arrested if any cop car could keep up. Dean drove with the focused intensity he reserved for family in danger. Both hands locked on the wheel, jaw set. Sam watched the landscape blur past and tried not to think about what could make an angel go silent. They found the site just after dawn. The trees leaned away from a central point, their trunks bent at angles that shouldn't support their own weight. The ground showed scorch marks in patterns Sam recognized from Enochian texts. Except the symbols were backwards or inside out, or both simultaneously depending on how you looked at them. Dean stepped out of the car, shotgun loaded with rounds that had killed everything from demons to lesser gods. The air felt thick like humidity made of static. His breath came out visible despite the temperature being well above freezing. You feel that? Dean's voice carried low, careful. Sam nodded. His laptop registered electromagnetic fluctuations, spiking in patterns that looked almost like Morse code, except the intervals were wrong. Too precise, too deliberate. Like something was tapping on reality's walls, testing for weak spots. A branch fell. Not breaking, not snapping, just fell, detaching from the tree with a soft whisper and drifting down slower than gravity should allow. It hit the ground and immediately sprouted roots that spread in perfect geometric spirals. Okay. Dean's grip tightened on the shotgun. That's new. Sam approached the center point where Castiel's coordinates had led. No sign of the angel. No blood. No struggle. Just a circular depression in the soil that looked like something heavy had pressed down and then simply stopped existing in this location. The grass around the circle bent inward, each blade pointing toward the center like iron filings around a magnet. Except they weren't bending in real time. They'd been frozen mid-movement, caught between one position and another, existing in both states at once. Sam crouched, careful not to touch anything. His mind cataloged details, cross-referencing against every creature, every phenomenon, every cosmic event he'd researched. Nothing matched. Or rather, pieces matched too many things, fragments of different threats stitched together into something that shouldn't cohere. Sulfur? Dean asked, checking the air. No ozone either. Nothing chemical. Sam stood scanning the area. Whatever did this, it's not following normal rules. Since when do we deal with normal? I mean the rules we know. Demon signatures, angel marks, spell residue. This is... Sam gestured at the frozen grass. It's like reality got edited. Find and replace. Dean's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, checked again. The screen showed a text message, except the words kept rearranging themselves. Not glitching. Rearranging like someone was playing with alphabet blocks. Dean Winchester, hunter, killer of things that shouldn't die. Currently standing on my welcome mat. Dean showed Sam the phone. The text continued scrolling, rewriting itself with each line. Your angel friend is fine. Well-defined fine. He's experiencing some perspective adjustments. But he's breathing. Mostly. Who is this? Dean typed back. The response came immediately, words forming not as a reply, but as an overlay across his entire screen, spreading like ink in water. Bill Cipher, your new favorite problem. Turn around. Dean spun shotgun up a finger on the trigger. Sam moved simultaneously, positioning himself back to back with his brother, scanning the tree line. Nothing. Empty forest. Morning light filtering through branches that still leaned at those impossible angles. Then the light changed, not dimming, not brightening. Changing the quality, shifting like someone had adjusted a setting that didn't exist. Colors intensified past their natural saturation reds, 2 red greens, 2 green. Everything bleeding into itself. A shape appeared 15 feet away. Yellow. Geometric. Hovering at eye level with an attention that felt less like observation and more like being appraised for purchase. One eye dominated its triangular form pupil, blown mud, and watching both of them at once. The thing wore a top hat that stayed in place through no mechanism. Sam could identify a bow tie that sat beneath that unblinking stare, despite there being no body to attach to. Dean fired. The shotgun's roar split the morning. The slug crossed the distance in a perfect straight line, then simply stopped. Not impacting, not deflecting. Stopping suspended an inch from the triangle's surface, rotating slowly to present its brass casing toward them, like a business card. The slug fell, hitting the dirt without sound. Cute, the thing said. Its voice carried the cadence of a carnival barker, bright and enthusiastic. But you're thinking too small. Bullets are for things with organs. Dean pumped another round, aimed center mass. The triangle tilted slightly, an expression that might have been amusement. Go ahead, I'll wait. Dean didn't fire. Something in his gut. The hunter's instinct that had kept him breathing through 15 years of this job screamed that pulling the trigger again would accomplish nothing except proving the thing's point. Sam stepped forward, keeping his brother in peripheral vision. What did you do to Castiel? Borrowed him, temporarily. He makes a great tour guide. The triangle drifted closer, movements smooth as oil. You're Sam, the smart one. Stanford dropout, demon blood. Currently very concerned about proper ritual construction. Sam's blood went cold. Nothing should know that. Nothing outside their immediate circle. The demon blood was buried deep, scrubbed from every record, every memory they could erase. And you're Dean. The triangle continued its gaze, sliding to fix on the older Winchester. The loyal one. Daddy issues. Spent 40 years in hell. Currently wondering if this thing bleeds when you cut it. Dean's hand moved toward the angel blade at his belt. It tracked the movement, amused. It doesn't, Bill said, helpfully. But I appreciate the fighting spirit. You two are exactly what I need. For what? Sam asked, mind racing through possibilities, discarding each one as insufficient. For a demonstration. The triangle gestured. The slug on the ground rose, hung suspended, then bent into a perfect triangle shape identical to the entity's form. See, I'm new here. Fresh off the interdimensional express, and I need to establish some ground rules. We don't make deals with... I'm not asking. Bill's gaze locked on Sam with absolute focus. I'm informing. Your angel opened a door I walked through. Now I'm here, and I'm not leaving. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Dean moved blade out, closing the distance with speed born from muscle memory and rage. The angel blade could kill anything. Had killed things that called themselves unkillable. 3 steps, arm cocked back, strike zone identified. He swung. The blade passed through the triangle like cutting smoke. Dean stumbled off balance, wheeling around to face the thing that hadn't moved, hadn't dodged, had simply existed in a space where the blade didn't touch. "See, that's the problem with you hunter types," Bill said conversationally. "Always trying to kill what you don't understand." "I'm not hostile, I'm just inconvenient." Sam's laptop chimed. He glanced down. Every file had been renamed to variations of a single phrase. "Reality is an illusion." The words repeated across folders, applications, his desktop background. "What do you want?" Sam's voice stayed level through effort. "Right now, I want you to understand something." The triangle expanded slightly, growing to fill more visual space without actually moving. "Your laws, your magic, your cosmic bureaucracy, they work on consensus. And I just changed what the words mean." Dean backed toward Sam Blade, still raised useless, but held anyway. "Where's Cass?" "Safe. Relatively. He's getting a crash course in alternative physics." The eye sparkled with something like genuine enthusiasm. "Don't worry, I'm not cruel, just thorough. He'll be back when he's ready to have a very interesting conversation about Heaven's operating system." The triangle drifted upward, rising past the tree line. "I'll be seeing you both very soon. We have so much to discuss. Deals to make, worlds to improve. We don't deal with your kind," Dean spat. "You don't even know what kind I am." The voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "But you will. Oh, you absolutely will." The shape vanished. Not teleporting, not dissolving. Just ceasing to occupy the space, like a video paused and the frame deleted. The colors returned to normal. The air pressure released. Dean's phone stopped showing messages, returning to its home screen as if nothing had happened. They stood in the clearing, breathing hard, weapons drawn against an enemy that had left without ever feeling threatened. Sam stared at his laptop. The files were back to normal. No trace of the intrusion. But a new folder sat on his desktop labeled simply Countdown. Inside a single text file with 6 words. "The door doesn't close anymore." Dean lowered his blade. "What the hell was that?" "Something that knows us," Sam said quietly. "And we don't know it." They drove back to the bunker in silence, each processing what they'd seen, what they'd felt. Sam's mind spun through databases, lore, forbidden texts. Nothing matched. Dean's hands gripped the wheel tight enough to hurt, jaw clenched against the fury of helplessness. Back in the bunker, Sam spread his research across the library table. Texts on reality manipulation, files on cosmic entities, everything they had on things that shouldn't exist. Dean poured whiskey, drank it, poured another. "We need Cass." "I know. And we need to know what that thing is." "I know." Dean slammed his glass down. "Then what do we know, Sam? Because right now, I got nothing except a thing that made me look like an idiot and knows things it shouldn't." Sam stared at a page, seeing the words without reading them. "We know it's playing. We know it could have killed us and didn't. We know it wants something." "Deals," it said, "deals." "Yeah." Sam looked up. "Which means it needs consent. Needs us to agree to something." "Then we don't agree." "It's not that simple." Sam pulled up his laptop, began cross-referencing. If it can change what words mean, change definitions, then consent might not look like consent by the time we realize what we've agreed to. Dean grabbed the whiskey bottle, poured for both of them. "So we're dealing with something that bends reality, knows our life stories, and plays word games with the universe. Basically." "Great." Dean drained his glass. "Just great." Sam's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered on the speaker. Static. Then a voice smooth and British familiar, despite years of radio silence. "Boys, Heard you've got yourself a problem. Might be I can help. Might be we help each other. Dean leaned forward. Crowley, the one and only. Currently experiencing some very interesting distortions in Hell's infrastructure. Thought we might compare notes. See what's making the whole cosmos twitch. Sam and Dean exchanged looks. Crowley only called when he needed something, and what he needed usually cost more than they wanted to pay. But right now, information was worth the price. Where? Dean asked. The usual place. Midnight. Come alone. A pause. And boys, bring everything you know about things that shouldn't exist. I suspect we're all going to need it. The line went dead. Sam closed his laptop. Dean stared at the whiskey like it might hold answers. Outside the bunker, the sun climbed toward noon. And in 7 locations across Kansas, grass continued to bend at angles that defied botany's shadows. Fell in directions unconnected to light sources, and the air held a quality of waiting, like the world was holding its breath before the next act began. In the space between spaces, Bill's Cipher laughed and the sound carried no echo, because echoes implied walls, and walls implied limits, and limits were about to become very negotiable. The bar was called Crossroads. Crowley's sense of irony had never been subtle. Sam and Dean arrived 15 minutes early, a habit that had kept them breathing through too many potential ambushes. The place sat empty except for the bartender, who didn't look up when they entered, and a jukebox playing something from the 70s that made Dean's jaw tighten with recognition. Their father's favorite song. Not a coincidence. They chose a booth with clear sight lines to both exits. Dean kept his hand near the angel blade. Sam spread salt lines under the table with practiced efficiency, invisible to casual observation, but enough to slow anything that smoked. Crowley materialized at midnight, exactly sitting across from them without the theatrics he usually employed. No smoke, no dramatic entrance, just a man in an expensive suit who looked tired in ways that didn't show on his face. Boys, he gestured and 3 glasses of whiskey appeared on the table. Drink, you'll need it. Dean ignored the glass. You said Hell's twitching. Want to elaborate? Hell isn't twitching. Hell is recalibrating. Crowley picked up his own glass, studied the amber liquid. Summoning circles are firing late. Transit times between layers have doubled, then halved, then tripled. Contracts are executing out of sequence. It's like someone reordered the filing system while we weren't looking. Bill's Cipher, Sam said. Crowley's expression shifted just slightly. Recognition mixed with something that might have been concern, if the King of Hell allowed himself that particular luxury. So you've met our new friend. Delightful, isn't he? He knew things, Sam said carefully. Personal things. No summoning should give access to that kind of information. That's because he didn't summon anything. Crowley set his glass down untouched. He walked through an open door and started reading the infrastructure. Hell, heaven, the space between. He's not hacking the system. He's learning the source code. The bartender dropped a glass. It shattered, but the pieces fell upward, suspended for 3 seconds before gravity remembered how to work. Dean's hand moved to his blade. Crowley didn't flinch. That's been happening more frequently, Crowley said. Little skips, pauses, reality checking its notes. Sam pulled out his laptop, began pulling up files. We've documented ripple effects across 7 locations, all tied to the original breach point. The Nephilim energy created a rift, and something came through. Not something, someone. Crowley leaned forward. Bill's Cipher isn't a demon, isn't an angel, isn't anything our taxonomies can classify because he predates the filing system. He's from somewhere else, somewhere that plays by different rules, and he's absolutely fascinated by ours. Fascinated how? Dean asked. The way a locksmith is fascinated by a new brand of safe. Crowley finally drank a single swallow. He's been poking at Hell's contract mechanisms for the past 6 hours, not breaking them, testing them, seeing how much torque they can take before the language changes meaning. The jukebox switched songs without anyone touching it. The new track played backwards for 4 bars before correcting itself. Sam's fingers flew across his keyboard. If he can alter contract language, he can rewrite the terms of every deal ever made. Not just contracts, oaths, bindings. The fundamental agreements that keep heaven and hell from tearing each other apart. Crowley's voice dropped. He's looking for leverage points, places where a single word change cascades into structural collapse. So we stop him, Dean said. Simple, direct, the Winchester solution to most problems. How? Crowley gestured at the space around them. You saw what your weapons did. Nothing. Because he's not violating any laws. He's just reading the fine print very, very carefully. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, but the temperature was wrong. Not cold like winter. Cold like the absence of thermal energy, like heat had been politely asked to leave and decided it had better things to do. Bill Cipher drifted through the doorway, his form casting shadows in directions the light sources couldn't explain. He'd changed since their last encounter. Small details. The bow tie was red now instead of black. The top hat sat at a different angle. Adjustments like he was workshopping his appearance. Gentlemen? Bill's voice carried cheerful enthusiasm. Hope I'm not interrupting. Oh wait, I absolutely am. That's the best part. Crowley stood slow and deliberate. Cipher, Crowley, King of Hell. Current approval rating among your subjects is 32% down 3 points from last quarter. Might want to work on your management style. Bill floated closer, circling the table. And the Winchester brothers. Together at last. This is like a crossover episode. Dean's hand moved toward his blade. Bill noticed, laughed. Still thinking in sharp objects. So limiting. He gestured. The angel blade lifted from Dean's belt, drifted to the center of the table, and began spinning like a compass needle. See, that's what I love about you hunters? You've got 3 solutions: kill it, trap it, or banish it. Very efficient. Completely inadequate for what's happening, but efficient. The blade stopped spinning, pointing directly at Crowley. Awkward, Bill said. Sam closed his laptop. What do you want? Finally, the smart one asks the smart question. Bill expanded slightly, filling more visual space. I want what everyone wants. Optimization, efficiency, a universe that runs on better algorithms. Translation? Crowley said flatly. Translation, your reality is clunky. Heaven and hell playing tug-of-war with souls. Angels following orders they don't understand. Demons making deals that benefit nobody. It's a mess. I can streamline it. By rewriting the rules, Sam said. By upgrading them. Bill's pupil dilated. Right now, you're all running on legacy code, outdated protocols. I'm offering a patch, better throughput, fewer contradictions. Everyone wins. Except the people who lose, Dean said. There's always churn in system migration. Bill dismissed the concern with a wave. But the net result: faster processing, clearer outcomes, no more ambiguity about who goes where and why. Crowley's expression had gone carefully neutral. Sam recognized the look. The King of Hell had just realized something, and he didn't like what he'd figured out. You're not here to destroy, Crowley said slowly. You're here to own. Bill's form rippled with something that might have been approval. See, he gets it. I'm not going to blow up your playground. I'm going to take over the lease and improve the property value. By making yourself the landlord, Sam said. By making myself the system administrator. Big difference. Landlords collect rent. Admins set permissions. Bill drifted closer to Sam. And right now, permissions in this reality are an absolute disaster. Anyone can summon anyone. Contracts have more loopholes than clauses. The whole thing runs on good faith and crossed fingers. It works, Dean said. It limps along, Bill countered. But it could sing. I could make it sing. Clean protocols, universal language. No more translation errors between an angelic and demonic, everything speaking the same code. Your code bomb, Crowley said. Naturally, the bartender's face began to melt, not into gore, but into geometric patterns that rearranged themselves into a new configuration before solidifying back into human features. Nobody screamed. The bartender didn't seem to notice. That's been happening too, Crowley said quietly. People rebuilding, new arrangements, same pieces, different assembly. Sam's laptop chimed. He opened it. Every file had been reorganized into folders labeled with designations he didn't recognize. Efficient, logical, completely alien to how he'd structured anything. Just a demonstration, Bill said. Imagine that level of optimization applied to everything. Souls sorted by merit without angelic bias. Demons promoted on competence instead of cruelty. Hell actually functioning as a rehabilitation system instead of an eternal punishment factory. You're selling utopia, Sam said. I'm selling efficiency. Utopia is subjective. Efficiency is mathematics. Bill pulled something from the air, a contract appearing between his fingers like a magic trick. Which brings me to my offer. He laid the document on the table. Standard binding agreement, 7 pages, formatted in legal text that hurt to read. Sam scanned the opening paragraph. You want access to the Men of Letters archives, he said. I want information. You have the best collection of mystical documentation in this hemisphere. Enochian grammar. Demonic etymology. The original language frameworks that built this whole mess. Bill gestured at reality in general. Let me read your books. In exchange, I'll leave your immediate area alone. No ripples within 100 miles of your bunker. Complete stability. For how long? Dean asked. As long as you maintain the access. Revoke my library card. The protection ends. Bill rotated the contract. Simple. Clear. No hidden clauses because I don't need hidden clauses. I'm asking for something you're not using and offering something you desperately need. Crowley leaned back. He's telling the truth. No linguistic tricks in the text. It's exactly what he says it is. Which should terrify you, Bill added cheerfully. Because if I'm offering a fair deal, it means what I'm after is worth more than whatever I'm trading. Economics, boys. Everything has a price. Sam read further. The language was clean. Almost too clean. Every term defined. Every condition explicit. No room for interpretation, because interpretation was the weapon Bill used, and he didn't need to hide it in this particular document. Why the archive specifically? Sam asked. Because I need to understand how you built your house before I renovate. Bill's pupil tracked across all 3 of them. Heaven and hell didn't spontaneously generate. Someone wrote the operating instructions. Someone established the protocols. Those books contain the original documentation, and I need to see the author's notes. To rewrite them, Dean said. To improve them, Bill countered. Semantics, my favorite game. The contract sat on the table inert and waiting. Sam could see Crowley performing calculations, weighing options. Dean's jaw worked, chewing on rage and helplessness in equal measure. There's something else, Sam said. Something you're not mentioning. Bill's form brightened, pleased. There it is. The analytical mind. Yes, there's something else. There's always something else. He gestured. The bar's wallpaper began to peel, revealing layer after layer underneath. Each layer showed a different pattern, a different reality, peeling back through possibilities. Somewhere in hell's basement, someone is keeping an archangel locked up, draining his grace, using him as a battery. Bill's voice lost its carnival barker quality, became something flatter and more interested. That's inefficient, wasteful. And it suggests someone down there knows how to modify angelic architecture. Crowley's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his glass. I want that information, Bill said. The method, the technique. how to safely extract and repurpose archangel essence without destroying the source. Your books might have the theory. Hell's basement has the practice. I want both. Gabriel, Sam breathed. Is that his name? Bill tilted, curious. Cute. Trickster archetype, if I'm reading the resonance correctly. Powerful, underutilized. Currently being milked like a very expensive cow. The pupil narrowed. I don't like waste. Waste offends me. That archangel should be free to operate at full capacity or completely drained and released. This middle ground is just poor resource management. You want to free him? Dean said, suspicion heavy in every word. I want to understand the process. What happens after is between him and whoever put him there. Bill rotated, addressing Crowley directly. You knew about this the whole time. You let it happen. Asmodeus operates outside my direct supervision, Crowley said carefully. His projects are his own. Convenient. Bill drifted back to the table. Here's my expanded offer. Grant me access to the archives. Tell me where they're keeping the archangel. And I'll make sure that when this is all over, you three are on the winning side. Your side, Sam said. The only side that matters when the music stops. Bill's form stabilized. I'm going to optimize this reality whether you help me or not. The difference is whether you're classified as assets or obstacles. Assets get upgraded. Obstacles get debugged. The contract remained on the table. The bartender's face cycled through another reconfiguration. The jukebox played 3 songs simultaneously, each in a different key that somehow harmonized. We need to discuss this, Sam said. Of course you do. That's what smart people do. They discuss. Bill began to fade, not leaving, but reducing his presence. You have 24 hours. After that, I start reading on my own, and you don't want to see what I have to do to bypass your wards. He paused at the door, form flickering. Oh, and Crowley, your approval rating just dropped to 30%. Might want to address that employee retention issue before it becomes a revolt. Then he was gone, and the bar felt suddenly heavier, like gravity had remembered its job after a brief vacation. Dean reached for the contract. Sam stopped him. Don't touch it, not yet. Crowley stood adjusting his suit. He's going to get what he wants, with or without you. The question is whether you want a seat at the table when he does. You sound like you're considering his offer, Dean said. I'm considering survival. There's a difference. Crowley headed for the door. That thing isn't playing games. It's not making threats. It's giving you an option to be useful before it decides you're in the way. And the archangel? Sam asked. Crowley stopped. Gabriel. Yes, he's alive. Barely. Asmodeus has been extracting grace for years, using it to power experiments, enhance demons' trade for favors. It's an open secret among the principalities. He turned back. Bill is right about one thing. It is wasteful and cruel. And I've done nothing to stop it because stopping it would cost me more than I'm willing to pay. That's your answer? Dean's voice could have cut steel. Political calculation. That's my existence. Every decision is political calculation. Every choice is measured in blood and power. Crowley met his stare. You want to save Gabriel, Bill's offering you away. You want to protect your archives, he's offering you away. The price is giving him exactly what he'll take anyway. Or we fight, Dean said, with what your blade passed through him like smoke. Your bullet stopped in midair. Your rituals are written in languages he's redefining. Crowley's voice dropped. You're not fighting an enemy. You're negotiating with inevitability. He left. The door closed. The jukebox returned to normal, playing one song in the correct key at the appropriate tempo. Sam and Dean sat in silence, staring at the contract. 7 pages. Clean language. A deal that was exactly what it claimed to be offered by something that made a hobby of redefining words. We can't trust him, Dean said. I know. We can't fight him. I know. We can't let him have the archives. Sam closed his laptop. I know. Outside the bar, the streetlights began to flicker in sequence like a pattern being tested. One by one they changed color. Red, yellow, blue, green. Cycling through options, each one perfectly functional, but wrong for the application. In the distance, something that might have been thunder or might have been laughter rolled across the empty Kansas night. The contract sat on the table, waiting for a signature that would change everything, or change nothing, depending on which version of the language you were reading. The warehouse in Detroit had been Asmodeus's private operation for 6 years. Crowley provided the coordinates with the tone of someone cutting losses. The building sat between industrial lots, unremarkable, except for the wards etched into every surface layer upon layer of demonic script that made Sam's eyes water when he tried to read them directly. They didn't breach the front entrance. Bill did that for them. The doors didn't explode. They folded origami style, each panel collapsing into geometric shapes that fit together like a solved puzzle. Where solid steel had been, there was now an archway made of triangles, each one reflecting a different version of the interior. Sam and Dean entered with weapons drawn, knowing the gesture was mostly symbolic. Castiel followed Grace, already flickering with the wrongness that saturated the air inside. Gabriel hung in the center of the main floor, suspended in chains that hummed with frequencies designed to keep archangels compliant. His wings were visible despite the physical impossibility, spread and pinned like a butterfly in a display case. Grace leaked from puncture points where needles fed into his vessel, draining the light that made him more than human. He looked terrible, gaunt, exhausted. But his eyes tracked their entrance with awareness that suggested consciousness hadn't left entirely. Well, Gabriel's voice rasped. Either you're the rescue party or the entertainment for my last day. Both options kind of suck. Bill materialized beside him, examining the apparatus with clinical interest. Fascinating setup. Continuous extraction without total depletion. They're treating you like renewable energy. He drifted closer to one of the needles. Inefficient, though. Loss rate is terrible. You're leaking about 40% of what they're pulling. Get away from him, Dean said, raising the angel blade. Bill ignored him, focused entirely on Gabriel. You're an archangel, created before humanity, witnessed the first stars, and they've got you hooked up like a car battery. He tilted. That offends me on a purely aesthetic level. Gabriel managed something that might have been a laugh. You're the anomaly. The thing making hell's basement lights flicker. His eyes tracked Bill's movement. You smell like bad code. I prefer to think of it as alternative syntax. Bill circled the chain, studying the configuration. These bindings are elegant. Whoever designed them understood angelic architecture at a fundamental level. I could learn from this. Sam stepped forward. We came to get him out. I know. I'm the one who told Crowley to tell you where to look. Bill reached out, not touching the chains, but running his hand parallel to them, reading something invisible. Consider it a gift. Your archangel battery in exchange for future considerations. Nothing's free, Castiel said, voice flat. True, but some prices are deferred. Bill snapped his fingers. The chains didn't break. They unknotted, unwinding in reverse sequence like watching installation footage played backwards. Gabriel caught himself mid-fall, wings flaring to arrest his descent. He landed on his feet, swaying but standing. Power flickered around him, diminished but present. Grace knit itself back together in slow pulses, repairing damage that had accumulated over years of extraction. Thanks. Gabriel rolled his shoulders. I think. Why do I feel like I just accepted terms and conditions without reading them? Because you did. Bill drifted back. But we can discuss payment later. Right now I'm curious about something. Gabriel's expression shifted wariness, replacing relief. Curious how? curious whether you can actually fight or if all that trickster reputation was marketing. Bill's form brightened. See, I've read about you. Changed people into candy, trapped them in TV shows, made a guy die of multiple slow-mo deaths in one day. Very creative, very meta. I've had better days for demonstrations, Gabriel said carefully. That's the spirit. Lower expectations. Bill gestured and the warehouse changed. Not violently, not even noticeably at first. But Sam felt it the way you feel altitude change in an airplane. Pressure shifting, perspective tilting. They were no longer in a warehouse, but somewhere that wore a warehouse's shape the way a mask wears a face. Gabriel recognized it immediately. You're opening a pocket. You're familiar with the technique. Bill's voice carried approval. Good. That means we're speaking the same dialect. The walls became screens. The floor became a stage. Canned laughter echoed from nowhere, and suddenly they were standing in a sitcom set complete with painted backdrop and studio audience seats filled with faceless silhouettes. Gabriel's work. Sam had read the reports. The TV universe. Changing channels, trapping people in genre fiction, until they learned whatever lesson the trickster deemed necessary. This is your playground, Bill said. Show me what you can do when you're not playing with humans. Gabriel straightened, and despite his weakened state power, rolled off him in waves. The archangel who'd fought Lucifer, who'd faked his death and stayed hidden for years, who understood stories well enough to trap people inside them. He gestured. The set changed. Became a western. High noon, single street. Two figures facing each other across dusty ground. Bill stood at one end, yellow and impossible against sepia tones. Gabriel stood at the other, manifesting a cowboy hat and duster that fit the genre's requirements. Really? Bill sounded delighted. You're going to trope me. Worked before. Gabriel's hand hovered over a holstered revolver that hadn't existed a moment ago. Every story has rules. You want meta, let's get meta. He drew. Fired. The bullet crossed the space between them, not lead, but condensed narrative weight, the inevitability of the gunslinger's shot in a Western showdown. Bill didn't dodge. The shot hit him dead center, and he flickered disrupted by the story's demands. For half a second, he looked affected, like the genre's gravity had pulled him into its orbit. Then he smiled. Oh, that's good. You're using archetypal force. Very clever. He reached up, pulled the narrative bullet out of his center like extracting a splinter. But here's the thing about stories, Gabriel. They only work when everyone agrees on the format. He crushed the bullet. It didn't shatter. It unspooled, becoming text that hung in the air. Protagonist shoots villain. The words rearranged themselves. Villain shoots protagonist. Gabriel's revolver fired without him pulling the trigger, the shot reversing to strike him instead. He stumbled back, hit by his own technique. You're editing the script, Gabriel said, voice tight. I'm finding the typos. Bill drifted forward. The Western dissolved. Became a hospital drama. White walls, harsh lights, monitors beeping in steady rhythms. Gabriel appeared in the bed wired to machines. Bill stood beside him in a doctor's coat, clipboard in hand. Let's try another genre, Bill said. This time you're the patient, I'm the specialist, and the diagnosis is terminal format error. The machine's flatlined. Gabriel jerked, feeling the story try to kill him through medical metaphor. He fought it, pouring grace into breaking the narrative, and succeeded. The hospital shattered, replaced by a courtroom. Better, Gabriel said, standing at the defendant's table. Let's see you argue your way out of universal law. A jury of abstract concepts sat in the box. Justice, order, consequence. Gabriel wore a prosecutor's suit, now addressing them with the authority of an angel who'd witnessed creation. The defendant stands accused of reality violation, unauthorized editing of fundamental code, corruption of established protocols. Gabriel's voice carried weight, pulling on cosmic law, on the agreements that held existence together. The universe demands compliance. How do you plead? Bill appeared at his own defense table, also in a suit. Not guilty by reason of superior syntax. The jury began to deliberate, but Bill interrupted. Actually, I'd like to challenge the court's jurisdiction. He stood addressing the abstract concepts directly. You're presiding over a case using language I helped redefine. Every word you think you understand, I changed its weight this morning. Justice doesn't mean what it used to. Order is running on my fork of the code. Consequence is negotiable. The courtroom flickered. The jury looked at each other uncertain. Their forms began to glitch, no longer sure what they represented. Gabriel felt control slipping. Changed tactics. The pocket reality shifted again, became a maze. Infinite corridors, impossible angles. Each turn revealing new impossibilities, new contradictions designed to trap anything that couldn't navigate paradox. Nice. Bill examined the architecture. Very Escher, very brain-melty. He touched a wall. It became a door. Touched another. It became a window. But you're still thinking in 3 dimensions. He stepped through a wall that wasn't there, emerged from a ceiling that had been a floor, walked on angles that hurt to perceive. The maze tried to contain him and failed because Bill wasn't navigating it. He was reading its construction and finding the seams. Gabriel appeared in multiple locations, simultaneously surrounding Bill, each copy firing grace in concentrated bursts. Not bullets, not metaphors, raw angelic energy, the substance that had helped shape the universe. The attacks converged. For a moment, Bill was contained in a sphere of pure creative force. The light that had made reality before it learned to follow rules. Then the sphere inverted, not exploding, not shattering. Inverting, turning inside out, so that Gabriel's attack became a cage around Gabriel himself, his own power used as his prison. Bill stood outside it unharmed. You're powerful, genuinely impressive. But you're still operating under the assumption that power is the variable that matters. He reached into the cage, not breaking it, but reaching through as if the barrier was a suggestion rather than a wall. Touched Gabriel's forehead. Power is substrate. What matters is who gets to define what power means. The pocket reality collapsed. Not gradually. Instantly. They were back in the warehouse, standing on concrete, surrounded by the mundane reality of industrial Detroit. Gabriel dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The brief freedom from the chains, the exertion of the duel, the years of drainage, all of it caught up at once. I can't beat you, he said quietly. Not like this. Maybe not ever. Probably not. Bill drifted closer, but there was something in his tone that wasn't mockery, almost respect. But you made me work for it. First one in this universe who has. He glanced at Sam and Dean, who'd watched the entire exchange, unable to interfere. Your Archangel understands something most don't. Reality is negotiable. He was just negotiating from a weaker position. Castiel stepped forward, placing himself between Bill and Gabriel. You got what you wanted? The demonstration? Now leave him alone. I didn't want a demonstration. I wanted to understand the mechanism. Bill rotated, addressing all of them. Gabriel reshapes reality by telling it stories it wants to believe. Powerful technique. Limited by the universe's willingness to accept new narratives. And you, Sam asked. I don't ask permission. I just edit the source file. Bill began to fade. Take your Archangel. Get him healthy. I'll need him later when things get interesting. For what? Gabriel managed, still kneeling. For the part where we discuss what happens after I finish reading Heaven's documentation. Bill's form reduced to outline. Spoiler, I'm going to find errors. Lots of them. And I'm going to fix them whether the original authors approve or not. He vanished completely. The warehouse felt suddenly larger, emptier. The chains that had held Gabriel lay on the floor in perfect geometric spirals, their purpose obsolete. Dean moved first, helping Gabriel stand. "Can you walk?" "Define walk." Gabriel leaned heavily on Dean's shoulder. "I can ambulate in a direction. Might not be the direction I intend, but it's movement." Castiel examined his brother Grace, recognizing Grace despite the damage. "You need rest, healing. The extraction left wounds that go deeper than flesh." "I've had worse." Gabriel's attempt at his usual flippancy fell flat. "Actually, no. This might be the worst. But I've had equally terrible in different ways." They made it outside. Dawn was breaking light, hitting Detroit's industrial sector in ways that looked almost hopeful. Sam's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 23 hours remaining. Tick-tock. "The contract," Sam said. "He's keeping count." Gabriel looked at him. "What contract?" "Later." Dean guided him toward the Impala. "Right now, we get you somewhere safe." "Nowhere safe from that thing." Gabriel glanced back at the warehouse. "I tried to trap it in every story I know. It just rewrote the narrative. That's not an angel, not a demon, not anything that belongs in this universe's taxonomy." "We know," Sam said. "Do you—" Gabriel's voice carried exhaustion and something deeper. Fear. "Because I've been fighting since before your species learned to make fire, and I've never encountered anything that could edit the rules of engagement mid-fight. That thing doesn't break reality. It makes reality uncertain about what it's supposed to be." Castiel opened the car door. "Which is why we need you. You understand meta-narrative. You've weaponized it. If anyone can help us counter this, it's you." Gabriel slid into the back seat, closed his eyes. "I'll try. But understand something. The next time it decides to escalate, we won't be having genre fights in pocket dimensions. It'll be doing to our actual universe what it just did to mine. Rewriting, editing, finding the typos in existence and correcting them according to its own style guide." The Impala pulled away from the warehouse. Behind them, the building began to fold slowly, methodically, until it resembled a triangle. It stayed that way for 3 seconds, then returned to its original shape, as if reality was practicing new configurations. Inside the car, Sam pulled out his laptop, began documenting everything they'd witnessed. Gabriel's techniques, Bill's counters, the way pocket realities responded to Bill's presence. Castiel sat in the front passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing city. His Grace hummed with anxiety, sensing patterns in the ripples that spread from each Bill encounter. "He's learning," Castiel said quietly. "Every interaction teaches him more about how our universe operates. The wards, the bindings, Gabriel's pocket dimensions. He's collecting data." "For what?" Dean asked, eyes on the road. "For optimization." Gabriel's voice came from the back, quiet and grim. "He told you already. He wants to upgrade. And now he knows how pocket realities work, how to collapse them, how to rewrite their rules." Sam looked up from his laptop. "The empty." Everyone in the car understood simultaneously. The empty. The void where angels and demons went when they died. A pocket of nothing. A space defined by absence. "If he can collapse Gabriel's pockets," Sam continued, "he can access the empty. And if he can access it, he can rewrite what death means." Gabriel finished. "Game over. New rules. Universe 2.0 now featuring Bill Cipher as the only admin with root access." Dean's hands tightened on the wheel. "Then we stop him before he gets there." "How?" Gabriel asked. "I'm an archangel. I've been around since the first word was spoken, and he treated our fight like a tutorial level. No one had an answer." The Impala drove through Detroit as the sun climbed higher, casting shadows that fell in slightly incorrect directions, off by degrees too small to notice unless you were looking for them. And in those shadows, if you knew how to read them, you could see triangular patterns forming and dissolving. testing configurations, practicing shapes that shouldn't exist but did anyway because someone had edited the definition of impossible. That fight was absolutely wild. Gabriel usually wins by playing with stories, but Bill just edited the script while they were still filming. It is like Gabriel was playing a video game, and Bill was the one who wrote the code. What is quite interesting here is that Bill is not just being mean for fun. He says he saved Gabriel because using an archangel as a battery was just bad management. It shows that Bill is like a super-powered office manager who wants the whole universe to run his way. I wonder if Gabriel ever had a chance to win. Or is Bill just way too powerful to be stopped by a story? The bunker felt safe for exactly 4 hours after they brought Gabriel home. Sam set him up in one of the guest rooms, close enough to monitor, but far enough for privacy. The archangel slept immediately, grace knitting itself back together in slow pulses that lit the room with intermittent flashes of golden light. Healing from years of extraction would take time. But at least here, surrounded by wards that had kept hunters alive for decades, he could rest without looking over his shoulder. Dean ran perimeter checks. Every sigil, every carved symbol, every line of protection that made the bunker impenetrable to things that shouldn't exist. Everything read clean, active, the supernatural equivalent of a fortress with all systems green. Castiel stood in the war room, hands pressed against the map table, feeling the wards hum through the building's bones. Men of letters construction, angelic reinforcement, demonic countermeasures, layer upon layer of protection that had withstood everything from Hell's armies to Lucifer himself. "We're secure," he said, more to reassure himself than the Winchesters. Sam looked up from his laptop where he'd been documenting their encounter with Bill. For now. The first sign came at hour 5. Dean was checking the weapons locker when he noticed the bullets. They sat in their box standard anti-demon rounds, but their shadows fell at the wrong angle. Not dramatically wrong, just slightly off, maybe 5 degrees from where they should point given the overhead lighting. He blinked, looked again. The shadows corrected themselves. "Sam!" His brother appeared in seconds. "What?" Dean pointed at the bullets. "Watch the shadows." They watched. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then one shadow drifted just a fraction before snapping back to proper alignment. Sam pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, held it over the box. The shadows fell correctly. He moved the light. The shadows followed normal and predictable. "Could be nothing," Dean said, not believing it. "Could be." Sam didn't believe it either. At hour 6, the library started lying. Not obviously. Sam was researching binding mechanics, cross-referencing 3 texts on Enochian grammar, when he noticed a footnote that didn't match his memory. He'd read this book a dozen times. The footnote had always referenced page 47. Now it said 48. He flipped to check. The reference material was on 47, exactly where it should be. He looked back at the footnote. It now correctly said 47. "Pages are shuffling," he called out. Dean appeared from the hallway. "What?" "The books. They're changing references. Small stuff. A page number here, a chapter citation there. Nothing major, but..." The map table flickered. Just once. The carved wood showing one configuration of wards, then another, then back to the original. Castiel's grace spiked with alarm. "Something's testing the structure." Dean moved to the armory, grabbed his favorite shotgun, checked the chamber. Loaded, ready. He positioned himself with clear sight lines to both the main entrance and the garage access. Nothing came through either door. At hour 7, the wards began their slow betrayal. Sam noticed it first in the warding against possession. The symbols still glowed with their characteristic blue-white light. The energy still flowed in proper circuits. But when he tested the field by walking through it, he felt a moment of dissonance, like stepping into a room and forgetting why he'd entered. "Cass, check this ward." Castiel examined the carved protection. His grace read it, analyzed the structure, confirmed the integrity. "It's functioning correctly. Perfect formation, no degradation." Then why did I feel weird walking through it? Weird how? Sam struggled to articulate. Like it didn't recognize me? Or like it recognized me but couldn't decide if I counted as inside or outside? Dean tested it himself. Walked through. Felt nothing unusual. Walked back. Felt a flicker of something barely perceptible, like static electricity that almost happened. It's inconsistent, Dean said. The bunker's main door groaned, not the sound of something forcing entry. The sound of metal under stress, flexing against pressure that came from within rather than without. The wards around the frame blazed bright, then dimmed, then brightened again, pulsing like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. Sam checked the monitors. No motion sensors tripped. No supernatural signatures within 100 yards. The perimeter was clear. The door groaned again. Dean raised his shotgun, aiming at the entrance. Something's out there. The wards should hold, Castiel said, but his voice carried doubt. They held for another 3 minutes. Then Bill Cipher appeared in the center of the war room, not entering, not teleporting in from outside. Appearing as if he'd always been there, and they'd simply failed to notice until this moment. Dean spun, fired. The shotgun blast crossed 6 feet of space and stopped pellets hanging in the air like frozen rain. They rotated slowly, then fell to the floor in a neat triangular pattern. "Your wards are impressive," Bill said conversationally. He examined the carved symbols on the nearest pillar. Multi-layered, redundant fail-safes, protection against everything from basic demons to archangels. His pupil tracked across the room. Someone really thought through the security architecture. "You shouldn't be able to get in here," Sam said, mind racing through possibilities. The wards were active. They'd checked. Everything was functioning exactly as designed. "I'm not in here." Bill drifted closer to one of the protection sigils, studying it with academic interest. "Technically, see, your wards define inside as the protected space and outside as the threat zone. Very clear boundary, very enforceable." He touched the wall. His hand passed through it like smoke, then solidified on the other side. "But what if inside and outside are just agreement on which side of a line matters?" Bill pulled his hand back, facing through the wall again. "I didn't cross your threshold. I just convinced the threshold we were already on the same side of the equation." Castiel's grace flared, reading the impossible. "You changed the ward's frame of reference. I optimized its perspective." Bill gestured at the entire bunker. "Your protection assumes a fixed meaning of boundary. Door, wall, line on the floor. But boundaries are linguistic constructs. They exist because everyone agrees they do." His form brightened. "I simply disagreed with the terminology." Dean fired again. The slugs stopped mid-flight, then reversed trajectory, embedding themselves in the wall behind him. "Stop shooting," Sam said quietly. "It's not helping." Bill floated to the map table, examining the carved representations of global wards and hunter networks. "This is fascinating. You've built an entire infrastructure on inherited terms. Demon, angel, monster. Each category has rules, and the rules have enforcement mechanisms." He traced a line across the map, but nobody ever questioned whether the categories themselves were still accurate. "They work," Dean said through clenched teeth. "They worked. Past tense." Bill rotated to face him. "I've been reading your books, the ones in your library. Every spell, every binding, every protection, they're all built on linguistic frameworks that assumed consistency. Angel means X. Demon means Y. Inside means protected. Outside means threat." He gestured. The wards around the room flickered, their light pulsing in patterns that didn't match their usual steady glow. But language evolves. Meanings drift. And when you base your entire security model on words staying still, you become vulnerable to anyone who knows how to edit the dictionary. Sam felt it then. The shift. Not in the wards themselves, but in what they protected against. The symbols still worked. The energy still flowed. But the targets had changed. Protection against demons now warded against something slightly different from what demon had meant this morning. "You're not breaking the wards," Sam said, understanding crystallizing. "You're changing what they mean." "Finally." Bill's pupil dilated with approval. "The smart one gets it. I'm not a hacker breaking through your firewall. I'm a linguist pointing out that your firewall is written in a language that just updated its syntax." Castiel stepped between Bill and the Winchesters, grace manifesting as barely visible wings that spread across the room. "This is sacred ground, consecrated by angels, reinforced by heaven's authority. You cannot simply redefine. Watch me." Bill didn't move, but Castiel's wings flickered their form, becoming uncertain. For a moment, they looked like wings. Then like the idea of wings. Then like a memory of what wings should be. Castiel stumbled, grace destabilizing. Not damaged, not drained. Just suddenly unsure of its own configuration, like trying to remember a word that had changed spelling overnight. "Your grace is fine," Bill assured him. "It's just experiencing a minor protocol mismatch. Heaven's operating system and my interpreter have different ideas about what an angel is. Give it a minute. You'll recalibrate." Dean moved blade out, crossing the distance with hunter speed. The angel blade should kill anything. Had killed things that claimed immortality. He swung for center mass. The blade passed through Bill without resistance. "This isn't a fight," Bill said, not even acknowledging the attack. "This is a code review. I'm finding bugs in your universe's implementation, and you're upset because fixing them requires rewriting assumptions you thought were permanent." The bunker groaned. Not the door this time. The entire structure, every wall and support beam flexing against forces that came from within. The wards blazed bright, trying to contain something. But the something wasn't an intrusion. It was a question. What counts as inside? The question spread through the bunker's foundation, like cracks in ice. Every protection, every sigil, every carefully maintained barrier, they all operated on consensus definitions that Bill was politely suggesting needed revision. Sam's laptop screen flickered. Files reorganized themselves into new hierarchies. Not deleting information, just filing it under different categories that made sense according to rules that hadn't existed an hour ago. "Stop," Sam said. "Not a command, a request. You're destabilizing everything." "I'm clarifying everything." Bill drifted toward the library. "For instance, your research assumes consistent categories. But what is a demon, really? A corrupted human soul, a created entity, a classification error. The answer changes depending on which century's theology you consult." He touched a shelf. The books rearranged themselves not alphabetically or by subject, but by some other organizing principle that looked almost right but felt completely wrong. "I'm just updating the filing system to reflect current understanding. Much more efficient." Dean tried shooting again. The bullets emerged from his gun, traveled 3 feet, then decided they'd rather not continue the journey. They fell clinking against the floor. "This is our home," Dean said, voice low and dangerous. "Get out." "Can't. I'm not in, remember." Bill floated back to the war room. "But I appreciate the territorial instinct." "Very mammalian. Unfortunately, territory requires boundaries, and boundaries require definitions, and definitions require consensus." The map table's surface began to shift. Not the physical wood, but the representation carved into it. Lines moved. Borders adjusted. The entire global network of hunters' safe houses and warded locations flickered as their protection protocols tried to recalculate what they were protecting against. "Here's what's happening," Bill said, addressing all 3 of them. "Your bunker is built on men of letters methodology, angelic reinforcement, demonic countermeasures. All of it predicated on fixed categories. But I've introduced ambiguity into the categories themselves." He gestured at the walls. The wards pulsed their light uncertain. "Demon doesn't mean exactly what it used to. Angel has some interpretive drift. Inside and outside are negotiating their boundary conditions. Your protection is still active. It's just not sure what it's protecting from anymore. Castiel's grace stabilized, but he looked shaken in a way Sam had never seen. You're not corrupting the wards. You're corrupting the language the wards are written in. Corrupting is such a judgmental term. I prefer versioning. Bill rotated, taking in the entire bunker. This place has stood for decades. Impressive longevity. But it was always going to fail eventually because it assumed the supernatural world was a static set of threats with fixed properties. He began to fade, not leaving but reducing presence. I'm teaching your defenses that nothing is fixed. Everything is negotiable. Every classification is subject to revision. His voice echoed from diminishing form. And once they learn that lesson, they stop being defenses and start being reference materials. Where are you going? Sam asked. Deeper. Bill's outline flickered. Your bunker's foundation is interesting. Not geographically. Conceptually. It exists in the space between mundane and magical, between known and unknown, between alive and dead. His pupil fixed on Sam with absolute focus. I want to see what else exists in those in-between spaces. The voids, the absences, the places where your reality forgot to fill in details. Then he was gone, and the bunker felt wrong in ways that had nothing to do with physical damage. The walls still stood. The wards still glowed. Every system reported green, but the air tasted different. Directions felt unreliable. The concept of shelter had become ambiguous. Dean lowered his gun. Tell me we've got a plan. Sam stared at his laptop, watching files continue their autonomous reorganization. We need to get to the empty. What? He's heading there. He as much as told us. Sam's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up everything they had on the void, where angels and demons went after death. It's the ultimate in-between space. Exists outside creation, outside heaven and hell. It's where definition goes to die. Castiel's expression went from shaken to horrified. If he reaches the empty, he can redefine death itself, Sam finished. Change what it means to end, to cease, to be gone. Dean's hand tightened on his useless shotgun. Then we stop him before he gets there. How? Sam gestured at the bunker around them. He just walked through the most protected place we know. Wards that have held against everything we've ever faced. And he didn't break them. He convinced them we were on the wrong side. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, still weak, but conscious. He'd felt the disturbance, the warping of protective structures. He's not going to attack the empty. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. He's going to debug it. Gabriel leaned against the doorframe. The empty is the void. The nothing. The absence where things go when they stop being things. It's defined entirely by what it's not. And, Dean prompted, and Bill just demonstrated he can rewrite negative classifications. Gabriel's voice carried the weight of cosmic understanding. If he can change what not existing means, he doesn't just control death. He controls the concept of absence itself. Sam closed his laptop slowly. We need to call in everyone. Crowley, other hunters, angels who aren't compromised. If he gets into the empty, it won't matter who you call. Gabriel interrupted. The empty predates creation. It predates heaven. It predates God. If Bill rewrites its fundamental meaning, everyone who ever died becomes subject to his version of what death means. The bunker's lights flickered. Not dimming, not failing, just pulsing in patterns that suggested someone was testing the connection between illumination and darkness, seeing how much overlap was negotiable. Dean set his shotgun down. Okay, new plan. We don't let him get there. He's already going there, Sam said quietly. We need to figure out how to fight someone in a place that's defined by not being a place. Castiel looked at the wards, still glowing, still active, still completely uncertain about what they were protecting. We need to find something that has meaning independent of language. Something that exists regardless of how it's defined. Does that exist? Dean asked. Nobody had an answer. Outside the bunker, in the space between spaces, Bill's cipher moved through layers of interpretation like a reader flipping through drafts. Each version of reality a different edit. Each edit a step closer to the source code. And at the bottom of all the layers, where creation had decided not to create, where existence had paused and left a gap, there was the empty. Waiting, silent, defined entirely by absence. Perfect for someone who wanted to rewrite what absence meant. Castiel felt it first in the spaces between his thoughts. Not pain, not intrusion, just absence expanding. Like standing in a room and realizing the walls had been there all along, but you'd stopped being able to see them. The sensation spread through his grace, not damaging, but displacing, pushing against the boundaries of what he was, with the weight of what wasn't. He was in the bunker's library when it happened, helping Sam cross-reference angelic hierarchies against documented empty encounters. The book in his hands became heavier. Not physically, conceptually. Each word on the page carried more weight than it should, as if meaning had gained mass. Castiel, Sam looked up from his laptop. Something's wrong. Castiel set the book down carefully, worried it might fall through the table. Not here. Everywhere. The empty had always been there, of course. The void where angels and demons went when they truly died. The nothing that existed before creation decided to exist. Castiel had been there once briefly, and the memory sat in his grace like scar tissue, not painful, but never quite healed. Now that scar was pulling, not calling him back, not dragging him toward oblivion, just acknowledging his presence the way you might notice someone standing behind you in a crowd. Except the crowd was all of creation, and what stood behind it was the absence of everything. Sam's laptop screen flickered. Not glitching. Flickering between states like reality couldn't decide whether pixels should emit light or embrace darkness. The uncertainty lasted 3 seconds before resolving into normal display. He's doing it, Sam said quietly. He's actually trying to reach the empty. Castiel moved to the window. Outside, the Kansas landscape looked normal. Fields, trees, sky. But the colors felt wrong, like someone had adjusted saturation toward grayscale without committing fully. Everything teetering between vivid and void. We need to stop him before he makes contact. How? Sam's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up every reference they had on the empty, on void theory, on the spaces that existed before God spoke light into being. We couldn't stop him in the bunker. Couldn't trap him in Gabriel's pocket dimensions. What makes you think we can stop him from touching something that predates every defense we know? Gabriel appeared in the doorway, still weak but mobile. His grace flickered with recognition, sensing what Castiel sensed. He's not trying to enter it. Both of them turned. The empty can't be entered. Gabriel continued, leaning against the frame. Not by force. Not by will. You can only go there when you're dead. And even then, you don't go, you just stop being anywhere else. He paused. But you can call out to it. Wake it up. Make it notice you're there. Like Castiel did, Sam said, remembering the files. Like Jack did, Gabriel corrected. When he wanted his mother back. When he shouted into the void, loud enough that it had to respond. His expression darkened. Bill's doing the same thing. But he's not asking for someone back. He's asking how the retrieval system works. Castiel's grace contracted, sensing the truth. He wants to understand the mechanism, how souls are stored, how absence maintains itself, how nothing stays nothing when surrounded by everything. The lights dimmed, not failing. dimming as if photons had decided brightness was negotiable. They stayed at 70% for 5 seconds, then returned to full. But the transition felt uncertain. Dean burst in from the garage, shotgun in hand. Something just hit every ward simultaneously, not breaking through, just pressing, like testing for weak spots. It's not attacking the bunker, Castiel said. It's happening everywhere. Heaven, hell, the spaces between. Sam pulled up a global monitoring grid built from Hunter Network reports and supernatural activity sensors. Red markers bloomed across the map. Not clustered, distributed. Every major city, every crossroads, every place where the veil between worlds wore thin, all showing the same anomaly. Simultaneous disturbance. No epicenter. As if something was touching the entire universe at once. That's not possible, Dean said, but he didn't sound convinced. Gabriel moved to the map, studied the pattern. He's using the rift as an amplifier. The Nephilim energy that opened the first breach, it created a resonance. Bill's riding that wave across dimensional boundaries, calling into the void from every location where the fabric is already stretched. Castiel felt his grace surge with alarm. Not fear. Angels didn't fear in the way humans did. But recognition of something fundamentally wrong, the way a cell might recognize poison. The empty is waking up. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sam's laptop went dark. Completely dark, not sleeping or powered down, but displaying pure black, like a window into nothing. Text appeared white letters against void. Stop calling. Then the screen returned to normal, all programs running, no data lost. As if the interruption had never happened, except it absolutely had. Dean raised his shotgun toward the ceiling, the walls every direction at once, because there was no direction to aim when the threat was conceptual. Was that the shadow god? Castiel confirmed. The entity that maintains the empty. It just sent a message. Through my laptop. Sam stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. Through every electronic device connected to networks, Gabriel said. Probably through every reflecting surface, every pool of still water, every space where nothing meets something. He sat heavily in a chair. The empty doesn't communicate often. When it does, the message is usually simple. Sleep, silence, stop. The bunker groaned. Not the structure. The concept. The idea of shelter strained against the notion that nowhere was safe when the void itself had been disturbed. Castiel closed his eyes, extending his perception beyond the physical. His grace touched the network of angelic communication, the frequency heaven used to coordinate across creation. Static. Not dead, but full of interference voices trying to connect and finding only gaps where words should be. Heaven's channels are disrupted, he reported. Angels can't coordinate. Messages are arriving delayed or not at all. Hell's no better, came Crowley's voice from the doorway. The king of hell looked disheveled. His suit rumpled in ways that suggested he'd been dealing with emergencies for hours. Half my communication infrastructure is routing through dead zones. Summons are arriving 6 hours late. Some are not arriving at all. One poor demon got summoned to 3 locations simultaneously and literally tore himself apart trying to manifest in all of them. He walked to the map, gestured at the distribution of red markers. This isn't localized chaos. This is systemic uncertainty. The fundamental protocols that let supernatural entities navigate creation are losing coherence. Dean lowered his gun, recognizing futility. Because Bill is making the empty uncertain about what it's supposed to be. Worse, Crowley poured himself whiskey from the bunker's supply without asking. He's making it uncertain about whether being and not being are actually different states. Sam stood pacing. If the empty stops maintaining clear boundaries between existence and non-existence, then death stops being permanent, or life stops being guaranteed, or both, or neither. Ontological collapse, Gabriel said quietly, when the foundation of reality forgets what it's holding up. The temperature dropped. Not cold like winter, cold like the absence of thermal energy, like heat had been asked to leave and complied. Breath became visible. Not from atmospheric conditions, but from the sudden sharp contrast between living warmth and encroaching void. Castiel felt it pulling harder now. His grace, his presence, the fundamental fact of his continued being, all of it being questioned by something vast and patient and profoundly annoyed at being questioned in return. "He's calling again," Castiel managed. Louder. The windows went black. Not covered, not dark from nightfall, but displaying void. Pure absence filling the frames where glass should show the outside world. The blackness held for 7 seconds. When it cleared, the landscape outside had changed. Subtly. The trees stood in slightly different positions. The road curved at a fractionally different angle. Like reality had been saved, closed, and reopened from a backup that was 99% accurate, but not quite perfect. "Did we just—" Dean started. "No," Gabriel interrupted. "We stayed in place. The world shifted around us, just a little. Just enough to notice that position is negotiable when the void gets involved." Sam's phone rang, unknown number. He answered on speaker. Bill's voice came through but wrong. Layered with echoes that suggested he was speaking from multiple locations, simultaneously his words arriving through different routes and assembling themselves on the other end. "Having fun yet?" Dean moved toward the phone. "What are you doing?" "Research. The empty is fascinating. Did you know it doesn't actually sleep? It just pretends to because existing is exhausting when you're literally made of not existing." The layered voices made it impossible to tell if Bill was amused or serious. But when you wake it up, really wake it up, it has to decide what it is. And that decision ripples. "Stop," Castiel said, voice carrying angelic authority. "You're destabilizing everything. I'm clarifying everything. There's a difference." Bill's tone shifted, losing some of its carnival enthusiasm. "Your universe has been running on unexamined assumptions. Life versus death, being versus nothing, heaven, hell, and the void between. Nice categories, very organized, completely arbitrary. The phone screen showed static, but the static formed patterns. Triangles within triangles, recursive and infinite. The empty maintains the boundary," Bill continued. "It's the literal edge of creation. But edges are just agreements about where things stop. And I'm very good at renegotiating agreements." "You're going to collapse everything," Sam said. "Only if everyone panics." The voices lost synchronization for a moment, some arriving faster than others, creating a dissonant echo. "I'm not destroying the boundary. I'm asking it questions. What counts as dead? What counts as gone? What's the difference between sleeping in the void and sleeping in a bed?" "There's a massive difference," Gabriel said. "Is there? Both are states of inactivity. Both involve unconsciousness. The only difference is location and permanence." Bill's form flickered into view on every screen in the bunker, simultaneously computer monitors, phone displays, even the microwave's digital clock. "I'm just suggesting that permanence is a variable, not a constant." The shadow's presence pushed back. Castiel felt it like atmospheric pressure multiplying the weight of nothing, asserting its right to remain nothing. His grace bent under the force, not breaking, but compressing, folded into smaller and smaller spaces. Around him, the others felt it too. Dean's breath came shorter. Sam's laptop screen cracked not from impact, but from the stress of being asked to display both something and nothing in the same space. Crowley's form flickered his meat suit, struggling to maintain solidity, when the boundary between demon and vessel became uncertain. "It's pushing back," Castiel said through gritted teeth. "Good." Bill's voices unified, speaking in perfect synchronization for the first time. "I was hoping it would. Can't learn how something works without seeing it react to stress." The pressure increased. Gabriel collapsed to one knee, Grace unable to support his vessel's weight. when the nature of being itself was being questioned. Dean grabbed the table for support, his hunter's instinct screaming danger from every direction and no direction at once. Sam's research years of accumulated knowledge, carefully documented encounters, meticulously cross-referenced lore began deleting itself. Not corrupting, not erasing, just ceasing to have ever been written, as if the past was being edited to remove the parts that contradicted current conditions. "Stop calling," came a voice that wasn't a voice. Words formed from the absence of sound, speaking through the gaps between heartbeats and the spaces where breath should be. Stop calling. The shadow. The entity that managed the empty. Not God's creation. Not part of the original design. Just the thing that was there before design existed, maintaining the nothing. So creation had something to be created against. Bill's response came immediately cheerful and utterly unconcerned. "Make me." The world held its breath. Then the empty responded not with words, but with demonstration. For one eternal second, everything stopped being. Not destroyed, not erased. Just briefly, comprehensively, completely absent. Castiel experienced total cessation. The complete erasure of self, of grace of identity. Not death. Not sleep. The absolute nothing that had preceded angels being spoken into form. Then it released, and they all snapped back into being gasping, as if they'd been drowning in air. "Interesting," Bill said, his voices scattered again across frequencies. "You can assert authority over the living by demonstrating what cessation feels like. Very elegant, very visceral. A pause. But that only works if I'm subject to your jurisdiction. Am I?" The shadow didn't respond. "See, I'm not dead." Bill continued conversational again. "I'm not from this universe's ontological framework. Your void has rules about who belongs there and who doesn't. But I don't fit your categories." His form appeared in the center of the room, fully manifested, more solid than he'd been in any previous encounter. "So when you try to demonstrate my cessation, I just don't agree." He rotated slowly, taking in their recovering forms. "I learned something valuable just now, though. The empty can assert itself, can push back, can remind creation what the alternative looks like." His pupil tracked across each of them. "But it can't actually force compliance from something that operates outside its original parameters." Castiel managed to stand, Grace still shaking from the experience. "You're antagonizing something that could end you. Could it?" Bill tilted, genuinely curious. "Or would it just be trying to apply deletion protocols to a file format it doesn't recognize?" He drifted closer to Castiel. "Your angel of Thursday. Your grace barely held together when the shadow flexed. But you're designed to manifest in this universe. I'm not." The pressure eased but didn't vanish. The shadow withdrawing conserving energy, or perhaps simply losing interest in a problem that wouldn't resolve through assertion of authority. "Here's what I learned," Bill said, addressing the room. "The empty maintains itself through passive authority. It doesn't fight. It doesn't argue. It simply is what it is, and that's usually enough to keep everything in order." He began to fade. But when something questions that authority, really questions it, the empty has to actively defend its nature. An active defense requires energy, attention, engagement. He disappeared completely, voice echoing from nowhere. I wonder how long it can stay engaged before it gets tired of maintaining boundaries that used to maintain themselves. The screens went dark again, this time genuinely unpowered. When they flickered back to life, everything was normal. Files restored, cracks healed, the world outside showing correct positions and proper curves. But the temperature stayed low. The pressure remained as background weight. And in the spaces between things, between heartbeats, between words, between thoughts, there was a sense of something vast and patient and profoundly disturbed. Sam checked his research files. Everything back. exactly as it had been. Except for one new document labeled simply Observation Log, written in formatting that matched nothing in his system. He opened it. Subject William Cipher, status active. Nuisance location undefined, threat level. Increasing countermeasure pending. The file closed itself, deleted, and was gone. Gabriel pulled himself upright, Grace still trembling. He's not just poking the empty anymore. He's teaching it to be conscious of itself. Making it think about what it is instead of just being it. Why is that bad? Dean asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Because the empty works through unconsciousness. Through being so fundamentally not thing that it doesn't have to try. It just is absence the way space is empty. Gabriel sat heavily. But if you make it conscious, make it defend itself, make it think about maintaining boundaries, it starts acting like a thing instead of a nothing. And once it's a thing, Sam finished, it becomes subject to the same rules as everything else. Castiel felt his grace stabilize, but the memory of cessation remained. He's not trying to destroy the empty. He's trying to convert it, turn void into variable. Crowley set down his empty glass. And if he succeeds, death stops being permanent retirement and becomes temporary filing error. The bunkers settled around them, wards humming with uncertainty. Every protection suddenly unsure what it was protecting against when the nature of being itself had been called into question. Outside across the globe, angels tried to communicate and found only static. Demons attempted summons and arrived in the wrong locations. The dead in the empty shifted, not waking but stirring, responding to disturbance in the nothing that held them, and somewhere in the spaces between. Bill Cipher took notes, cataloging responses, building a model of how the universe maintained its boundaries, so he could rewrite them more efficiently. The game had changed. No longer about deals or access or optimization. Now it was about whether the Foundation could survive being asked to explain itself. Things just got very real. Bill is literally poking the one thing in the universe that just wants to sleep, which is the empty. By making the void think about itself, he's turning nothing into a something that he can control. That is such a genius, but terrifying move. If death stops being a permanent end and just becomes a temporary filing error, does anything even matter anymore? It feels like the stakes just hit the ceiling for our favorite hunters. I wonder what we would feel if we knew death was not the end, just because a triangle wanted to update the system. Well, I bet Sam is about to try a huge ritual in the next chapter. Sam spent 12 hours building the ritual, not improvising, not guessing. 12 hours, cross-referencing every text they had, on anchoring on dimensional stability, on sealing breaches that predated modern magical theory. The Nephilim rift was energy, yes, but energy followed patterns, and patterns could be bound. The library floor became a canvas, Enochian script in ash, Sumerian binding circles in salt, blood sigils from 3 different hunter traditions, each one a fail-safe for when the others inevitably proved insufficient. At the center, a representation of the rift itself. Not the physical tear, but the conceptual wound, the place where Jack's birth had convinced reality that boundaries were optional. Dean watched from the doorway, cleaning his gun for the 5th time. The motion was automatic muscle memory covering for the fact that bullets had stopped mattering days ago. You sure about this? No. Sam didn't look up from the final characters he was etching into the floor. But it's theoretically sound. The rift is still tied to Nephilim energy. That energy has a signature. We anchor the signature, we close the door Bill's using to amplify his range. Gabriel leaned against the wall, Grace still recovering but present enough to read the work. Your theory's solid. The execution is clean. If this were a normal dimensional breach, you'd seal it. But, Dean heard it in his tone, but Bill's not using the rift the way doors are supposed to work. He's using it as a speaker. Closing it won't stop him talking. Just makes him find a different frequency. Then we make him stop talking. Sam stood surveying the completed ritual, every line precise, every symbol charged. 12 hours of work that would either save the world or prove that saving had become impossible. Castiel entered carrying the last component, a vessel of grace donated from 3 angels who'd volunteered because heaven itself was fragmenting. The communication channels had collapsed entirely. Orders from above arrived garbled or didn't arrive at all. The angelic host was operating on last known directives, and those directives were 6 days old. They gave this freely, Castiel said, setting the vessel at the ritual's heart. They understand what's at stake. Sam checked his notes one final time. The ritual required activation in sequence 7 steps, each building on the last, creating a cascade that would lock the rift's frequency and sever Bill's connection to the amplification network. In theory. Everyone ready? Dean racked his shotgun despite knowing its futility. Do it, Sam began. The first words were Enochian, calling on the original language that had named creation into form, the ash symbols lit with pale fire responding to the summons. The ritual was asking reality to remember what boundaries meant before Bill had started redefining terms. The second layer activated. Sumerian bindings that predated angels, drawing on agreements older than heaven. The salt circles began to glow, each one a node in a network designed to hold fast against anything that pushed. Gabriel added his voice, speaking in the tongue archangels used when creation was young. The ritual needed power, and archangel grace, even diminished, carried authority that lesser beings couldn't match. The room temperature dropped. The air became dense, heavy with potential. The ritual was working. Sam felt it building layer upon layer of constraints, weaving together into a structure that could contain even interdimensional bleed. Then Bill appeared, not in the center of the ritual, not breaching the circles, just appearing in the corner of the room, manifesting as if he'd been there all along and they'd simply failed to notice. Cute setup. His voice carried less enthusiasm than usual, flatter, more focused. Nephilim anchor binding, very thorough. You even included fail-safes for conceptual drift. He drifted closer, examining the work without touching. This would absolutely work if I were playing by the rules you think apply. Sam didn't stop. Third layer. Blood sigils flaring to life, hunter tradition meeting angelic authority, meeting primordial binding. The ritual demanded completion once started. Stopping mid-sequence would collapse the structure and waste the donated grace. Dean, Sam said quietly. Dean moved, positioning himself between Bill and Sam. Shotgun raised more as statement than weapon. Bill glanced at him, something almost like respect crossing his features. Still pointing guns, still standing in the way. Bill's pupil tracked across Dean's face. You know it won't work. You've seen it fail every time. But you do it anyway, because that's what Winchester is. Yeah. Dean's fingers stayed off the trigger. It does. Bill rotated back to the ritual. Sam was on the 4th layer now, binding the rift signature to heaven's original architectural framework. The grace vessel pulsed its light, synchronizing with the words, the symbols, the web of constraints tightening around the dimensional breach. Here's the problem, Bill said. He reached out, not touching the ritual, but gesturing around it. Your binding assumes anchor refers to a fixed point. But fixed is relative, especially when you can edit what relative signifies. The 5th layer activated. Sam felt it snap into place, the ritual reaching critical mass. One more step, and it would cascade the entire structure, collapsing inward to seal the rift permanently. Bill touched the air beside one of the Enochian characters. The symbol didn't change. The ash stayed in place. The fire kept burning. But the meaning shifted just slightly, the difference between bind and connect. A single character's purpose inverted, and the inversion spread through the network like a virus finding host code. No. Sam started the 6th layer anyway, trying to force the ritual through before the corruption propagated. It was too late. The binding circles didn't break. They completed. Perfectly. Exactly as designed. The rift's signature was anchored. The amplification network was severed. Every component of the ritual achieved its stated goal. And in doing so, it opened the door wider, because Bill had changed one variable. Anchor no longer signified hold in place. It became broadcast stronger. The ritual's power, all the donated grace, 12 hours of perfect execution, it all fed directly into amplifying the very thing it was meant to contain. The rift bloomed. Not physically, conceptually. Its influence spreading from 7 locations to 70. 707,000. Every place the ritual's power touched became a new speaker in Bill's network. Sam felt it happen and understood immediately. They hadn't failed through incompetence. They'd failed through precision. Every detail executed correctly, which meant every detail served the inverted purpose perfectly. All right. Bill's form, bright and solidified, became more real than anything else in the room. Show's over. The casual playfulness was gone. What remained was focus, intent. Bill had been performing, yes, but also learning cataloging, building a complete model of how this universe enforced its rules. Now he had the data he needed. You tried. Credit for that. You built a solid ritual. Proper execution. Good theory. Bill expanded his presence, filling the space not physically, but conceptually, pushing against the boundaries of what the room could contain. But you built it using a language I've been rewriting for the past week. Castiel's grace flared in alarm. Heaven is fragmented. Yes, I know. Bill's attention shifted to the angel. 11,347 angels currently unable to coordinate because the communication protocols just realized they've been speaking different dialects for 72 hours. It'll get worse. The bunkers shuddered. Not from impact. From the fundamental concept of shelter becoming uncertain. Walls stayed solid, but stopped guaranteeing safety. Doors remained closed, but no longer promised keeping things out. Dean fired. The shotgun's roar filled the space. The slugs crossed the distance and stopped, not hitting a barrier, but encountering a region where kinetic energy had been politely asked to reconsider its trajectory. They hovered, rotated, then accelerated back toward Dean faster than they'd left the barrel. Dean dove. The slugs embedded in the wall behind where he'd stood, the wood splintering in triangular patterns. Still trying to shoot me. I respect the commitment. Bill turned his attention to the ritual's remains. The symbols still glowed. The power still flowed. But it served his purpose now, broadcasting his influence across continental scales. Gabriel stepped forward, grace manifesting visibly despite his weakened state. You can't sustain this. The empty is watching. Heaven is collapsing. Hell is fragmenting. You're destabilizing the entire framework. Yes, that's the point. Bill's pupil dilated. Your framework was always going to collapse, held together by linguistic agreements that nobody audited in millennia. I'm just accelerating the inevitable. He gestured. The library's books began reorganizing themselves. Not alphabetically, not by subject, by a classification system that made sense according to rules that hadn't been invented yet. Titles changed mid-reading. Pages inserted themselves between existing pages, adding information that contradicted what came before while remaining internally consistent. I've made my decision, Bill said. Originally, I was going to do this slowly. Let you adapt. Give the universe time to adjust to new operating procedures. His form pulsed with something that might have been regret if geometric shapes felt regret. But you tried to seal me out. That means you're not interested in negotiation. Sam's laptop screen lit up displaying code that wasn't in any programming language Sam recognized. The characters rearranged themselves into a message. Updating universal constants. Please wait. What does that mean? Dean demanded, picking himself up, reloading, despite knowing its futility. It means I'm done asking permission. Bill rose toward the ceiling, phasing through it without disturbing the structure. His voice echoed from everywhere. Every ritual, every ward, every protection you've built, they all assumed certain things stayed constant. Demon equals X, angel equals Y, dead equals gone, alive equals present. The ceiling didn't collapse, but the concept of above became negotiable. Gravity continued working, but it checked in before committing to a direction. I'm rewriting those constants, not breaking them, not ignoring them, redefining their core values in the fundamental documentation. Bill's presence spread through the bunker like code, through a system touching every ward, every sigil, every carefully maintained protection. They didn't fail. They updated. Protection against demons. Now protected demons from angels. Wards against possession invited possession from anything with the right syntax. Binding circles became broadcasting arrays. Every defense the men of letters had built over decades became a component in Bill's new architecture. Stop! Castiel's voice carried angelic authority, the command that had made demons kneel and monsters flee. Bill ignored it. Not because he was immune, but because authority had just been reclassified as a social convention, rather than a universal constant. Dean charged. No gun this time. Just him, pure Winchester's stubbornness incarnate, crossing the distance with the angel blade, because if bullets didn't work, maybe sacred metal would. Maybe conviction mattered, maybe. The blade passed through Bill without resistance. Dean stumbled off balance, wheeled around to face something that hadn't moved, hadn't dodged, had simply existed in a state where physical objects didn't apply. You don't get to decide how this ends, Dean said, voice rough with fury and helplessness. Bill rotated to face him fully. No, I do. That's what admin access is. He drifted closer, almost gentle. But I appreciate the fighting spirit. You're exactly what makes this universe interesting. All that determination, all that refusal to accept reality's verdict. He reached out, not touching Dean, but gesturing around him. Unfortunately, determination is chemistry, and chemistry is math, and math is notation, and I just changed the notation standards. Dean felt it. Not pain, not control. Just his body briefly uncertain about what Dean Winchester represented. The sensation lasted half a second, before his sheer concentrated refusal to be redefined forced coherence back into the concept. Bill pulled back, genuinely surprised. Huh. Strong narrative weight. You exist partially through story logic, not just biology. He examined Dean like a puzzle. Interesting. I'll have to account for that. The bunker lights flickered through colors that didn't have names yet. Red, blue, yellow, triangle. The last one shouldn't have been a color, but the lights broadcasted anyway, creating illumination that looked like geometric proof. Across Kansas, then spreading outward, reality began its update process. Grass bent at new angles as growth accepted revised parameters. Water flowed in directions that made sense under different vector logic. The sky cycled through states trying to reconcile what blue meant when the frequency chart had been rewritten. People didn't notice immediately. Human perception ran on legacy hardware lagging behind the changes. But animals felt it. Birds tried to fly and found themselves navigating space that had added dimensions it wasn't using yet. Dogs barked at nothing, or at the concept of nothing, which had just become a visible frequency. The empty's going to respond, Gabriel said, Grace, trembling with the effort of maintaining coherence while the rules changed underneath him. You've done more than disturb it. You've made it a participant. It'll have to enforce its own boundaries, or stop being what it is. I know. Bill's form began to fade, spreading itself across the update process rather than maintaining centralized presence. I'm counting on it. Can't optimize a system without seeing how all the components interact under stress. Sam grabbed his laptop, trying to document what was happening, trying to find a pattern in the changes that might suggest a counter-strategy. The files saved, then unsaved, then saved under different names. The data remained accurate, but the context kept shifting. There has to be a way to reverse this, Sam said more to himself than anyone else. Bill's voice came through the laptop speakers. There is, several actually, but they all require agreement on what reverse signifies, and I've just made that term conditionally dependent on variables you don't control. The rituals remains pulsed one final time. All that carefully bound power released not violently, but thoroughly spreading across the network Bill had created. Grace that had been donated to protect became fuel for transformation. Castiel felt heaven lurch, not falling, restructuring. Angels trying to maintain their posts found the posts had moved. The hierarchies remained, but the reporting structure had changed. Michael commanded legions, but the legions were now organized by a filing system he didn't recognize. This is bigger than heaven, Castiel said quietly, confirming what Gabriel had warned. It's bigger than everything. Bill's presence consolidated briefly in the center of the room, one last moment of direct communication. I'm not destroying your universe. I'm upgrading it. Better efficiency, clearer logic. No more contradictions between heaven and hell because they'll both be running the same operating system. Your operating system, Sam said. The only one that scales. The only one that admits what it is. Bill began dissolving into the update process, becoming less an entity and more a transformation in progress. You'll adapt. Humans are good at that. Or you won't. Natural selection applies under any framework. He was gone. Not departed. Distributed. Spread across 7,000 locations where the rift's influence had been amplified by Sam's perfect ritual, each location now broadcasting Bill's revised constants across reality. The bunker settled into its new configuration. The walls stood. The wards glowed. Everything functioned. But the meaning had changed. Safety was now a negotiable state. Protection was conditional. Home was a matter of perspective. Dean lowered the angel blade. Did we just make it worse? Sam stared at his laptop, watching files reorganize themselves according to logic that was internally consistent but completely alien. We gave him the power to do what he was going to do anyway, but faster. Gabriel collapsed, Grace unable to support his vessel when the fundamental rules of grace had been edited. Heaven's gone, not destroyed, translated. Every angel is speaking a different dialect now, and they're all correct because there's no shared reference anymore. Castiel helped him stand his own grace shaking. The empty will respond. It has to. And when it does, Dean asked, then Bill gets to see how absence responds to being asked to define itself in his new language. Gabriel's laugh was bitter. We're not fighting anymore. We're watching stress testing. Outside, the world continued updating. Most humans wouldn't notice for hours, maybe days. They'd wake up tomorrow and everything would look normal. But normal would signify something slightly different. And the day after, different again. Small shifts, each one internally consistent, adding up to a world that resembled what came before, but operated on fundamentally altered principles. Sam closed his laptop. The ritual had failed perfectly. Every component had worked exactly as designed, which meant Bill had predicted and utilized every outcome. They'd been playing checkers while Bill edited the definition of bored. So what do we do? Dean's voice was quiet, not defeated. Dean Winchester didn't defeat, but recognizing when the fight had changed from can we win to how do we survive. We adapt, Sam said. Find the loopholes in his system. He can rewrite constants, but even rewritten constants have gaps. Everything has exploits. And if we can't find them, Sam looked at his brother, at Castiel. at Gabriel. At the bunker that was still home but no longer safe in the way safe used to function. Then we make new ones. He's not God. He's not omnipotent. He's just really good at editing. And every edit leaves traces, differences between versions, places where the old rules and new rules overlap and contradict. That's our opening, Castiel said, understanding. The transition points, where his changes haven't fully propagated. Exactly. Sam pulled up a map on his laptop, watching it try to settle on which version of geography was currently accurate. He's updating the universe. That takes time. That takes processing. During the update, there are inconsistencies. Gabriel managed to smile despite his grace's trembling. You want to exploit system vulnerabilities during patch deployment. If that's what this is, yeah. Dean checked his gun again. Still useless, still comforting. All right. We've got a plan. Sort of. What about the bunker went dark, not a power failure. The lights were still on. But they weren't illuminating anything, as if the concept of light reveals darkness had been paused for revision. When illumination returned 3 seconds later, the room had changed. Subtly, the angle of the walls, the color of the floor, the shape of the doorway, all within parameters that looked right but felt wrong. And on every screen, every reflecting surface, every place where nothing could hold an image, the same message appeared. System update, complete rebooting, reality, estimated time unknown. Then the screens went black. The world held its breath. And somewhere in the spaces between everything that was Bill Cipher began running the first full diagnostic on a universe that was no longer certain what it was supposed to be.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss our future video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.